Hey everybody, and welcome to the next episode of our history of video gaming. Today is going to be a big one. We're talking about the contested and debate between the first-person shooter game. But before we get into that, I'm joined by Ben. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm doing great. How are you, Wes?
I'm doing pretty dang good.
Nice.
So what have you been playing over this past week?
I haven't been able to play that much, honestly, and I'm kind of disappointed by it, but I do log on almost every day just to see if anyone's played my Mario Maker levels. So
Nice.
I've been doing a little bit of that. I haven't made anything new, but 2 of my levels have 5 likes on them, which is
sweet.
pretty cool. Yeah, I'm down for that.
That's right, and they're both live now, so you're no longer waiting in queue limbo.
Yes, and my 3rd level, 2 people played it, and that's it. So I gotta do a better job. Actually, the last level that got likes, I actually posted to Reddit, so maybe I'll post this other one to Reddit as well. And I think I've got
Sweet, that's a good idea.
that. Yeah, I just figured, the average person that might come across my level in the new queue probably isn't good enough to beat it. I don't want to sound like I'm really good, but I try to make them hard.
You watch a lot of streamers, and you know tactics and stuff, so you make it intentionally hard.
Yes, I try to make each one basically to the breaking point of my own skill. So for at the average person, first of all, any level is going to be harder for them because I already know what to do. But
right.
They're also just hard levels. But I thought Reddit might be a place where there's more hardcore people at, so I threw my last level up there, and I think it worked out pretty well. I got a couple likes right off the back, and then probably 20 plays after that because it was in the rotation of things. So
that's sweet.
Yeah.
Well, people like it. I'm sure Reddit's a good platform for them to share it, get it a little more attention.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of people right now, going to Reddit trying to share their levels, understandably, because otherwise you're just waiting for that queue, which takes forever. So,
right.
It still gets lost somewhat, but if just one person sees it and plays it, that could be all that you need. So
that's beautiful, Ben. You're making art.
I try my best. Marvel themed Mario levels.
I mean, you can't miss, right? People love Mario and people love Marvel.
I know. Oh, that's what I'm going for. Which somehow, of my 3 levels, the Rhino level is the one that doesn't have any likes, and I'm pretty upset about that.
Yeah, people love Rhino. He's a meme, isn't he?
I feel like he's basically the Marvel version of the Kool-Aid guy. He's just busting through walls.
He kind of is, yeah.
And the whole level is basically just that. So
I was gonna say the Juggernaut, but that's Marvel too, isn't it?
It is Marvel too.
So confusing.
I could have named it Juggernaut, but you
would have had to name it I'm the Juggernaut bitch if you did.
I don't think Nintendo would have liked that.
That's true. Lots of asterisks.
Yeah, but in order for Mario to take damage and not die, the whole level he's wearing a purple black helmet thing. So I was well, that kind of looks like the Rhino colors,
Yeah.
If I had maybe I should have put the red helmet on him, and then I could call it Juggernaut.
Oh, it definitely would have been Juggernaut.
Yeah.
There you go. You can republish if it's not getting enough love as a Rhino.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about this forever.
I'm playing devil's advocate here, Ben. I like Rhino because he's ridiculous.
Well, he doesn't like Rhino. That's what I'm trying to say. What have you been playing, Wes?
Well, I was trying to think of how I was going to talk about Breath of the Wild for 30 minutes and keep it interesting, but I remembered that I've also been playing modded Minecraft recently, and I don't think I've been talking about that much.
No. What you been What kind of mod?
So it's a mod pack on Technic called Blightfall.
I think I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's a pretty big one. I think it's on their just kind of the Technic Launcher homepage too, of scrolling and popular mod packs. But it has, you load into the game and it says all 276 mods successfully loaded.
Yeah.
So I am super overwhelmed, but it's pretty cool. You start on a set map in a spaceship or whatever, and everything's covered in taint from the Thaumcraft mod, and you just gotta do a whole bunch of super convoluted Minecrafty kind of stuff to be able to clear all the taint.
Is this the one where you're in a bubble?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you start out
I have
in the
played
biodome.
this.
it's pretty interesting. I mean, I kind of usually play Minecraft just sort of as a way to hang out and play with and talk to whoever I'm playing with. So both my friends who I'm playing with now are actually making progress in the game, and I'm just getting stuck in the one cooking mod that's in the game, making all the food. For whatever reason, I get drawn to that kind of stuff.
Well, that's pretty
I get
awesome.
super pissed when I can't make more than just chicken sandwiches. But,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's been good. It's insane that still I go back to Minecraft even after I feel like I've done like everything to do in vanilla, but there's still stuff to do with all the mods.
I know mods are like so good, dude. Mods in a sandbox type of game can't go wrong. That's like all my favorite games.
Yeah, like all the which Warhammer is it? Dawn of War 2?
Dawn of War 1, Dawn of War 2 does have mods, but it's a different game, not as good. And
I
like,
gotcha.
Like Mountain Blade, you know?
Oh well, yeah, dude. Gecko Cujo.
Oh yeah.
Best mod
Star
ever.
Wars one.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of, especially old games, that people find a way to keep up because they love the game, and then they just make these crazy mods for it. It's awesome to see that they get kind of keep their interest even though they're past their popularity as just a vanilla game.
Oh yeah. I've even seen some, I forget what it is. I want to say it's like a Fallout 3 mod that's all Warhammer. I mean, like even really complex games like that, I feel like. I mean, that's like a 3D game. You're going to have like, you know, have to render the like 3D Warhammer assets that don't exist yet, you know?
Yeah.
But people do it, and it looks good, and it plays nice. So
there was a period in high school where all I did was go on ModDB and look up what the new Source or Half-Life 2 Total Conversion mod was.
Oh yeah.
Because there's some of those that were just like completely new games using Source.
Mm-hmm. And while we're on the topic of modding, why don't we get into the special topic? Because there's kind of a segue with arcade machines.
I can see that. Yeah, good segue.
So basically, the special topic this podcast is I wanted to talk about the hardware of arcade machines in the early 70s and also mini computers, which are kind of like the two main. Is console the right word at the time?
Yeah, consoles are like systems. I mean, you can be more general.
So I don't have that much to say about arcade machines, but one thing I did think was interesting is like basically all arcade machines were sold with a manual on like what every single like electronic component in the cabinet, like what they did and how to replace them and like the install of it. And what that meant was, obviously, if a piece gets broken, you can reorder it and repair it yourself. But it also meant that a lot of it was moddable because, you know, you would have the instructions in the back that said, hey, this is what decides how big the paddle is, for instance, in Pong. So if you wanted to alter how big the paddle was, you could just alter like something on that electronic piece of hardware, and you could do that. You know, you could change the score, you could change the cost of the machine, you could change the ball speed, and all this was like inside the cabinet, so that it wasn't like there was an options menu in the game, but the people who owned and ran these machines could get in there and change those systems. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and I know when I was looking through just from a couple of games I've played that were on arcade cabinets, and the flyers that I was reading when I was researching them, that's almost how the company was telling you that there was an options menu, because some of them would specifically say like you can change this setting. It's just like it's in the back. There's no options in the game. I think one of the ones I played today had a different like lives that you could set, and you could do it all from the back. And I know Pong at one point I think sold a conversion kit to make it a different game where you basically just plug something else in the back there. It's crazy how versatile they were with these like giant machines.
Yeah, and I feel like if you were an electromechanical engineer or whatever, you could get in there and basically make your own version of Pong or your own version of Wipeout or Elimination that's, you know, specific to your arcade. And I quite like that. I think that's really cool and interesting. So I wanted to bring that up. There is also we can also kind of mention modding on the computer side, where people's computer company newsletter comes out with the source code inside of it. So people are kind of taking that source code, adding their own twist to it, like we saw with Hercule, Snark, Mugwump, and all that, and republishing it in the newsletter. So I feel like that's also another form of modding in some way. I mean, you have the source code, you can always change things.
Yeah, it was interesting when I was looking at some of the computer games and actually didn't even realize how relevant a special topic this was, but this applies to the other game I played this week, where it's a little hard when you're looking at the history because it's been so openly shared for a lot of the computer games that were coming out at the time that everyone had like a new version the next year of the same game, where like this author did it that time, but then actually this guy found the code and did it that time. So it's really interesting to see how it evolved just from like everyone who was part of that community pitching in.
Yep, definitely. And, you know, having the access to those hardware components in the arcade machines or the source code allows people to mod and make that game that's different enough to be its own game. So, yeah, a little modding mention. I've got some other things I want to talk about as far as arcade machines and mini computers go. For one thing, I was interested to know how, like, what the cost was of arcade machines. Like, if you were going to buy a cabinet, right? We know that most of these video games cost $0.25 to play, but they sold at, it would be around $5,000 to $6,000 in today's money for an arcade machine, and the quarter would be like putting in like $1 to $1.50. So you need a lot of plays to break even on that.
Yeah, really.
Like, so it's still $5,000 to $6,000 for an arcade cabinet at this time. I also wanted to mention cocktail tables because they're actually really popular, and a lot of the games that we talk about as honorable mentions are cocktail tables. And what they are, it's basically like a little coffee table with 2 seats on either side, and then like a TV monitor in the middle built into the table with like a glass screen above it, so you can put, you know, your drinks or whatever on. And so you're like playing Pong or whatever, like looking down, like straining your neck against somebody sitting across the table from you who's, you know, looking at it upside down. So I thought that was kind of weird. And
yeah, well, I guess if you can convince people that they can put a beer on the table at the same time, that's enough to.
I guess so. Apparently
they'll be totally
really
fine
popular.
with looking at it upside down.
Yeah. Apparently they were really popular, and even like through the 80s they were pretty popular, and I've seen some of the like 80s looking cocktail tables, and they get kind of advanced, like there might be 2 TVs in it at an angle, so you can each, like, no one has to look upside down.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but like the joysticks and everything were like built into the table, so that's also kind of weird to think about. But yeah, cocktail tables, arcade machines, same thing, but just a little different sort of setup. And then moving on to mini computers, I just want to mention before I get into this, mainframe computers, which we've talked about before, are still being used, especially for the large scale like Play-Doh games like Empire. The first game I'm reviewing today is also a Play-Doh game, so that's mainly on a mainframe. But mini computers are starting to really gain popularity and overtaking mainframes at this point. They're called mini computers because they're supposed to be smaller and cheaper than the mainframes. However, they were about the size of a refrigerator, and they cost around, in today's money, $160,000. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, that was the cheap version. Okay, at this time. So again, it makes the computer basically only really purchasable for institutions like research and tech companies, as well as educational facilities like schools and colleges.
It's like why most of the computer games that we're seeing at this time are developed by people who had access to it while they were in the military, or people who were at MIT. Like there's a lot that are coming out from students at MIT who had access to it, but not really something you could put in your house.
Right. And I know the computer game I'm reviewing today, the person behind it developed it when he was at like an R&D company for electronics or something. So they're obviously more popular and more accessible than the mainframes were, but it's still very costly. Of all the mini computers, the most common ones were the PDP-8 and the PDP-12. And I also wanted to mention the Xerox Alto, which came out in 1973, was the first computer to be designed to be used with a mouse. Everything else was designed to be used basically by a keyboard. So that's why almost all the games that Wes and I play, it's keyboard only for the most part, because there just wasn't mouses. And even though the Xerox Alto came out in 73, that wasn't marketed towards consumers. So it's going to be some time before we see video games taking advantage of what a mouse can do in gaming. Also, in 1971, microprocessors are introduced by Intel, which greatly reduce costs and increase speed, and is kind of like the key to the personal computer that will come later and that we'll talk about later. But they're only introduced in 1971, so they haven't been around that long. And by I think 1973 or 74, HP and Toshiba also produced them. So already like companies that were very used to talking about today back in 1971 are on the edge of the tech world. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, crazy that there's still a lot of the big names around right now.
I know. So yeah, those are just some background on when we talk about mini computers, what they are. When we talk about arcade machines, you get an idea of how expensive they were to use and operate, and also how they were sold and packaged towards the people buying the actual cabinet, not just the people playing the games.
Very interesting stuff. Cool to know the background behind all the stuff that we're playing.
Oh yeah. Do you want to get into the timeline, Wes?
Yeah, I think that'd be a great time for that.
All right. Let's get into the timeline.
All right, everybody, welcome back, and let's get right into our timeline with the first honorable mention that we have today. The first one that we have is Countdown by Volley, and this one, nothing too crazy, but it's a clone basically of the Elimination and Wipeout games that we've seen, and Volley's sort of entry into all those games.
Yep, and Volley is like, I believe Ramtech's like a secret partner, so...
Yeah,
and I think Ramtech
I forget if they're secret or not, but I know it's like they might even be based in another country, right? Or is it?
Yeah, they might. Volley might be the North American publisher of Ramtech's games. That could be.
I think so. Yeah.
I don't know. We'll have to.
We'll clarify that at some point.
Yeah. We'll come back to them. So after Countdown, we have Wham Bam by PMC Electronics in 1974, just sometime. This is a split color version of Pong. So I think it's the first time we've got colored Pong besides Wimbledon, I want to say. But it's basically just a black background, and the left paddle is green and like the right is blue. And I think the ball was red or something. And it had smaller goals similar to like the soccer games, but that's about it. Didn't feel the need to cover that. After Wham Bam, we have Paddle Derby by Nutting Associates. So they're still making games, doing stuff somehow. I don't think they've done anything original other than those ones that we don't think were made, like a Watergate one.
Right, yeah. Because I think they were originally just like a cabinet company and didn't actually make the software, but maybe they're like, hey, if we copy stuff, we can do both.
Yeah. But basically, Paddle Derby is another Pong variant. But this one, it is a little different. I'll give them some credit for this one. Basically, each corner of the screen is in their own like little box. It's like a 4-player game. And every time they hit their own ball, so each quadrant has a ball roaming around there, bouncing off the edges. Every time that their paddle hits it, they get a point, and it's like the first one to 10 points or whatever wins. So it's a little bit different. I mean, there's 4 balls going around, and you're not really versing other people directly. It's more you versus can you hit the ball better than your opponents. So
Right, kind of like an individual skill test, but still a competition. Interesting.
yeah, I mean, it was a little bit different. So I want to give him props for that. It was in color, but it's kind of unknown whether it was just overlays or if it was native. And I also read that it might be the first game to use score bars, but I didn't get any like secondary sources on that, so I'm gonna leave that as a maybe.
As a hard maybe there.
Yeah,
Okay.
hard maybe. So I guess instead of counting to 10, it would be like a score bar that would steadily fill up.
Oh, okay.
Basically
Yeah,
the same thing, but
just a different visualization
Yeah.
of it. Cool. Well, and then on to the next ones that we have. There's Smatch by Renee Pierre and Spike It by Computer Games Incorporated. These were both released in the first quarter of 1974. And they're basically clones of the Odyssey table tennis, but they kept score, which Odyssey did not.
very important.
And after that, we had Club Tennis, also by Computer Games Incorporated in 74. And this was a Pong clone, but it had a button to serve rather than automatic serving, which is small, but I could see that being a nice change. Allows you to kind of control the flow of the game.
Yeah, it allows you to, like, if you got your opponent on edge, like maybe before you hit that button, you can play some mind games, you know?
There you go. Yeah. You'll brick like
fake
someone's
press
throwing a
it, you know?
basketball.
Yeah. And then that brings me to my first game that I rated, and it's going to be a contested one. This one and your game, Wes, are both the contested first-person shooter games. I played Space Sim, and you played Maze War. And the reason why they're contested, I'll just want to get it out of the way immediately, is Maze War was in development in 1973. Space Sim came out in March of 74, and then Maze War like came out like a little bit after that.
Right. Yeah. And from what I could find, nobody's sure of like the exact release date of when Maze War was playable. Other than that, it was like early-ish 74 and maybe after Space Sim.
Yeah. So as far as my research tells, Space Sim was the first one like released, but there were probably playable versions of Maze War before then, but it wasn't released until after. So
Right.
it's contested, but we have Space Sim first, and I'm going to talk about it first. This game caused headaches, Wes.
Oh no.
Yeah, lots of headaches. My God, I don't want to. How badly do I want to trash this game, Wes? I think it's basically unplayable.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's so bad. I mean, so basically what the game is, like when I played Empire before, that kind of had like this galaxy map, and you're looking at it from like a top-down view. So, you know, if there's a planet like on the northern part of your screen, like at the very top, and you're going up towards it, and you turn right, like the planet is still there at the very top, right? And now it looks like your spaceship's going to the right. But in Space Sim, it's from the perspective of the spaceship. So if I'm going straight and there's a planet straight ahead and I turn right, like the planet looks like it moved to the left because I'm from the perspective of the spaceship. And basically what that means, it's really hard to navigate this because you're in like, I don't know if you're in 3D space or not, but it's not as simple as just right, left, up, and down. You've got like, I think it's Alpha and Omega are in there. So I want to say it's like a 3D sort of plane that you're navigating.
Would that almost be like a 6 degrees of freedom? I don't want to throw that
kind of
phrase out there, but yeah.
it's hard because I basically would just stand still and then like basically turn around 360 degrees and then like 360 degrees like up and down, because so you can look like straight up, straight down and stuff.
Right.
And I would just keep doing that until I saw something in my vision, and then I went forward. So just navigating the world is hard and took me a long time. Actually, one thing that I thought was going to help me was the original creator of this, which the name is, I'm forgetting right now, but he's actually got a YouTube channel, and he played like this game a little bit. And I was like, oh, well, I can just watch him play it. Obviously, he knows what's going on. He can describe it. And he's describing this game, and like, it's clear he's like inputting things that aren't being shown on the screen. And I'm like, well, this is a waste of time. Like, I have no idea what's going on. He's like, yeah, now I'm going through the back of the sun. I'm like, what are you talking about? But this game is like super hard. Basically, the whole point of the game is you're on a spaceship. You start at a base, there's 4 teams, and you're basically, I think, just going to other teams' bases and trying to destroy it. I believe that's how the game is, but it's a 8-player multiplayer game, so there's probably 2 people on each team. So I imagine one person's probably trying to defend the base that you start from, and the other person's out trying to blow stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's some like neutral bases and stuff along the way. But I didn't even get into an engagement on this because I never actually found an enemy. I just spent most of my time just trying to navigate because the control layout doesn't make any sense and it's super hard. And yeah, it's one of those things where, like, let's say you want to turn around like 180 degrees, but your only option is to go by like sets of 7 degrees. It's like, why would you do this? It's super hard to get anything straight in front of you. You know, you kind of have to like, it's like slightly to the right and you go forward a lot. So it's really to the right and then you turn. So
weird.
Yeah, It's just hard. I will say it is 3D. It uses like vector-based graphics, which I know Maze War was the same. So It's basically like wireframe looking things. But this one was pretty cool because each of the 4 races had their own wireframe ship that looked different and interesting, and also each of them had their own base that looked a little bit different thing. So like one base might be like a bagel shape, and another one might be like a TV looking shape, you know.
Okay.
They're basically just squares and circles, but they did each have their own unique look to them. So I thought that was really impressive for the time.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising for a time where like basically all characters are the same, if they're even represented at all.
Yeah, right. So I thought that was pretty impressive. I mean, graphically, if you can find anything other than blank space, it's really impressive. But unfortunately, most of my time was spent just trying to navigate things and learn the controls, and it's no good because there's a help menu in the game, and in the help menu there's like it's like press J to load the tutorial, and then in parentheses it's like tutorial has not been made yet. I'm like, oh my god.
Perfect.
Yeah, honestly, I thought the controls were so bad that I thought the game was basically unplayable. You had like this speed that you had to control, like the speed of your ship, and the speed of your ship is exponential. So you would start at like 1 mile an hour, and then it would go up to like 10. And this is like the scale of the universe. So nothing's really happening unless you're in like the 100,000 zone.
Right.
But then if you hit it like one time too many, you're like 1 million and you zoom past everything. And if you go past the edge of the world, you get like a game over screen. So most of my experience was accidentally going a little too fast, leaving the system, and game over. So yeah, I gave gameplay a 1 out of 10, which I think is pretty high considering I spent 2 hours trying to play a game and I barely know how to play. I didn't even try to do anything combat related, which is like half of the game.
Right.
For graphics, I gave it 1.5 out of 10. I mean, at the end of the day, while the vector-based graphics are cool, you're only really seeing like 1 or 2 at a time, and they're basically just circles, squares, or combinations of them. So I don't know. I thought the ships were cool, but you're not really looking at the ships because you're in a first person perspective. There is like this weird thing where you can jump to the perspective of a planet and then like watch your ship leave. But as you can imagine, that was incredibly complicated and I didn't even try.
Yeah.
There's no sound, so sound is 0. And for relevance, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10 because it's the first FPS, and that's really exciting. Right. It's also like in 3D space, like taking it to another level. Like already, I feel like it's just. I mean, it was a landmark game, and that can't be contested. I feel like, but unless you're like a diehard fan and have spent your life making this game, like the creator did, I don't think anybody else can play it. So. Yeah, Spasim. That's, by the way, that's spelled Spasim, like spasm. So
right, and we narrowly avoided us both calling it spasm through the whole episode.
Yes, but also if you look it up on your own time, be careful. You might want to put computer game at the end or something. Oh, like when I was looking this up on YouTube, that wasn't a good idea. I was like weird spasming videos of people like having seizures, and I'm like, get me out of here.
As a strange place of the internet to be stuck in.
Yes. So, but you know, it was worth spending some time playing, I think.
Yeah, if nothing else for the historical and relevance of it.
Yeah, and now I can trash it.
There you go.
So, Wes,
all right.
What's the other contested FPS?
Well, let's get right into it. And I feel like mine's going to be a pretty rosy review compared to yours.
I think so.
So I played Maze War, which part of the reason it's contested, as we mentioned, is that it was being developed in 73, but it wasn't really released until 1974. And before I get too into it, I want to mention that there's a lot of sort of iterative versions of this game that came out like 1 year after each other. And when I was researching the history, the 77 version is a lot of what came up. So I tried to kind of pull myself away from that and make sure I was only reviewing the 74 version. But part of that definitely did bleed into just the relevance of it and seeing how it evolved. So take my ratings for what you will. They might have a little bit of bias from the versions of it in 77, but I'm trying to stay pretty true to rating the 1974 version. So to get started off, the release date isn't really certain because it wasn't really a hard release. It was kind of just available for people to play on computers if they had them. But debatably, it's one of the first-person shooters, as we mentioned. It was displayed using the IMLAC PDS-1 display, which was kind of like that stereotypical old computer that had an all-black background and then green graphics.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, it was neat watching the videos of it because it's kind of what you imagine when I'm thinking like old-school computer screen. And it was originally made by Steve Coley when he was working at NASA with the help of Greg Thompson and Howard Palmer. And then it wasn't actually released or in a playable form until Greg Thompson brought it over to MIT when he started working there and worked with other people to make the game multiplayer. And I got kind of down to a bit of a rabbit hole when I was researching this because I had totally forgot that this was before the internet existed.
Yeah.
And the way that they played multiplayer, when they first did it, it was just by connecting two computers with an Ethernet cord, and it was 2-player. But then they later made it available for 8 players multiplayer over something called the ARPANET, which led to the creation of the internet. And it was the Advanced Research Programs Agency Network. And it was part of the Department of Defense, which it cracks me up that all these huge video game breakthroughs are being made by people who are like doing government work, then also like, oh, maybe I should make a video game on the side.
Yeah. A video game about shooting people.
Right, exactly. They're like, man, this NASA stuff is boring. Time to make a Maze War.
Oh, yeah.
And to cover just the basic gameplay of it, it's a maze, as you can kind of get from the title of it. And you're going through trying to find other players. You don't really have lives, but you gain 10 points if you shoot somebody, and you lose 5 points if you're shot. Actually, I think I might have that mixed. You gain 5 if you shoot somebody, you lose 10 if you're something like that. But either way, there's an ebb and flow of points. And whenever you get shot, you respawn at a random different location in the maze. As far as I could tell, the maze is the same every time. I don't think it was randomly generated, but I could be wrong on that. And when your character moves, you basically move one section at a time. So you're not continuously moving, but you're kind of moving like one tile, like Legends of Grimrock style.
Yeah.
And it gave me the same sort of issue when I was playing versions of it where you're looking down a corridor and you see an enemy, and then you turn right. And since your whole view shifts, you're like, okay, well, I don't know if he's still there or not. Because I can only see straight ahead of me.
Yeah.
So it was a little disorienting with the sharp, only 90-degree movements, although it also made it a little bit easier to move than it sounds like the 7-degree movements were for you.
Yeah. And you could only go, you can't like look up and down when you play that game, right?
No, so this is just locked. So that's probably good for it because you can only move left and right. You could apparently, I wasn't able to do it in the versions I played, but you could also peek around corners.
Oh, okay.
Which is interesting. And you just couldn't be seen when you were peeking around the corner. So it was a tactic so that you could just like, yep, there's someone definitely there, and then sneak out and shoot them. But everyone had that tactic who was playing, so I guess it made it kind of fair. And an interesting thing I found when I was doing research on this is that originally in the very first playable versions of 74 in this game, enemy characters were just shown as the name that they entered floating on the screen. And you just kind of shot the name.
Nice.
But the later popular version that we talked about is this kind of strange looking floating eyeball. And I'm pretty sure that was the 77 version, which was actually made for the Xerox Alto, which we talked about.
Oh, cool. I didn't even plan that.
I know. That's why I was saying the whole time you were having that intro special topic, I'm like, this is incredibly relevant. Some other small things. Movement was really slow on the original because it was kind of really chugging along to be able to actually render this game, I think. And there were sort of screen flashes whenever you got shot and then randomly got teleported. And so for the ratings, I was treating this sort of in the context of the time, and I gave it a pretty high rating for graphics, a 3 out of 10, even though it is basically just lines, green lines on a black background. But the fact that it's simulated 3D vector graphics and that it makes this simple and fairly easy to understand maze in a first-person perspective, I thought that was all pretty cool, and all of that together, feel pretty comfortable giving it a 3 out of 10. And for sound, 0 out of 10. As far as I could tell, there wasn't any sound on it, though I did play a modern reimagining of the game that had the classic free sound clip of the Wilhelm scream every time someone died.
Oh, yeah.
It always makes me think of the My Leg dude from SpongeBob.
Mm-hmm.
If only that one was free, and then that could be in all the free online games.
We can make it happen.
So that was pretty good, but other than that, no sound, so 0 out of 10. For gameplay, I gave it a 3 out of 10. It's a first-person shooter and it's multiplayer, and like the first that I'd played, debatably the first, depending on how you're treating Space Sim in that timeline. It had points for kills and a way that you could compete and compare with your friends. And even though it was very simple and very slow, it had weird mechanics like peeking around corners that I really wouldn't expect for the first or one of the first first-person shooters.
Yeah.
And also traversing the maze just kind of keeps it interesting because it's not this open space where you have to maneuver, but you never really know when you're going to pop up on somebody. And so the relevance, I went really high on this one, considering all the stuff that the fact that it was like on this infant version of the internet and multiplayer and first-person shooter, and gave it a 9 out of 10, which is definitely the highest, or tied for the highest that I've given a game on this timeline.
Oh, yeah. And I want to add to that, I think it's the first game to have like a multiplayer deathmatch sort of thing happening, right?
Yeah, and I was thinking that too, and I was tentative to use the phrase deathmatch because I'm sure that is like it's definitely a term later on when you get to like the actual game deathmatch and all that, but it definitely is like everyone's in a room, every man for himself, and you get points if you kill people. So that sounds like deathmatch to me. Yeah.
I feel like they're already making game modes that are super popular even today, you know?
Right, yeah. And that was my impression while I was playing it. This game itself is very simple, and really it's the historical value that makes it fun playing. There's not too much you can really do. I can see it maybe being fun with friends for like a couple hours, but that's probably about it. But just every single piece of it is core and like represents the whole FPS genre. they're always multiplayer, online, first-person shooters with a deathmatch game mode, and that's all this game was.
Yeah.
So I thought it was hugely relevant, and also just because FPS is one of the most popular genres in the gaming industry. So overall, when I was taking all that into account, I gave it a 5 out of 10 rating. Relevance really carried it, but that's a pretty high rating for stuff of this time. Probably the highest I've given it. Maybe
No.
I know you've thrown a 4.5 out there, right?
I have thrown a 4.5. I think you gave Pong an 8 for overall.
Oh, did I overall?
I think so,
that makes sense. I mean, it's Pong.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's the second highest that we've ever done. And
Absolutely.
I think rightly deserved too.
Yeah, because it's just, even if the game itself isn't super engaging, it's for the time so innovative, and every aspect of it is seen in all FPS games now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
By the way, Spasim, I gave overall a 2.5 out of 10. But I think that kind of represents, even though they're both contested, that Maze War was the one that was the most influential of the two.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was seeing when I went through the history. It seems like it's sort of a beloved, like the start of FPS.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yes, that's pretty much all I had for that one. Great game, super impressed with it. Fun to have that contrast with the other contested first FPS game.
Yeah, you're lucky, Wes.
I know, and I will count myself lucky every day. But for now, let's move on to, of course, more Pong clones.
Oh yeah.
Our next honorable mention. Yeah, we can only stay on original stuff for so long in 1974 before we have to get back to the inevitable.
Yeah.
This next one is called World Cup Football / Soccer, and it was by Atari. It was released in April of 74. And this one was actually just a Pong variant where each player controls 5 paddles, 2 forwards, 2 defense, and 1 goalie. And it's kind of similar to the Gran Trak hockey that we covered earlier.
I love that because I feel like Pong's like, you know, you got each person has 1 paddle, and then Ramtek's like, what if you had 3 paddles? And then Atari's like, what if you had 5 paddles?
It's the logical evolution. They're like, oh man, more paddles is what the people want.
So they did that. The next game that we're going to have as an honorable mention is Hesitation by Allied Leisure. And we haven't seen them in a while because they were dealing with that fire.
Right.
But this is another Pong variant released in April of 74 where instead of like going off screen, whenever the ball hits an edge, it'll like hesitate for a second. So it'll like pause there and then will bounce back at the other player in like kind of a random shot. So the physics don't bounce off the walls like you would expect. It's a lot more random and a lot more, I don't know if it's skill based because I guess you have a second to like think about it as it's like holding the ball before it releases and fires. But yeah, it's kind of just another variant where the ball will hesitate for a little second and then continue to bounce back. So not a whole lot of information or emulation on that one, so I couldn't go into it too in depth. But we also had, also by Allied Leisure, Knockball and Improbable, which are 2 different games, and these are both foreign releases, and I think they're just Hesitation released in different countries, but there's very little info on those 2. And finally, we have Telekick by NSM, and that was also released in 1974, and this is a German release of a Pong clone similar to Hesitation. But the reason I want to bring this one up, because I think it's really interesting, is it's a 4-player game, but on either team, there'd be 1 person with a 4-directional joystick, like they could play like table tennis from the Odyssey, and then 1 person from each team also had just a single vertical paddle that could go up and down like Pong, which is really weird.
Yeah.
So, I guess you would trade off on who could have the cooler paddle, which would probably be the one that could go up, down, left, and right, rather than just up and down. So
you lose a bet, cool. You have to be the up and down paddle.
Yeah. So I thought that one was kind of interesting. I don't know why they would do that, but you know.
Yeah, interesting if that was a design choice or a limitation of the hardware. Who knows?
I want to say it was a design choice. Like maybe they were going for some sort of soccer kind of game where like the goalie wouldn't leave the goal, so that the goalies would be on the edges as the Pong.
Okay. Well, yeah, I can see that then.
Yeah. At least that's what I hope they were thinking that.
And then we just have one more honorable mention in the list today, and that is Player's Choice by PMC. This one was 2 different games in one cabinet. One was just a Pong Stubbles variant, and the other was an elimination variant where you could catch the ball, aim it where you want it to go, and then actually fire it off in the direction where you aimed. But this one, we couldn't really find much more information than what was on the flyer, and there's kind of some contradiction over what the game types on the machine actually were.
So is the case with these old games sometimes.
Just par for the course.
Yeah. I feel like that one was a cocktail table, by the way. But
I could definitely see it being a cocktail table.
Yeah. A lot of these are cocktail tables, honestly. Not the next one, though, which is the next game I'm reviewing in depth, called Gran Trak 10 by Atari, which I think is the first real racing video game ever made.
Wow.
So, yeah, this one, I feel like, we've played a couple kind of racing type games, but this one I feel like is the most accurate. For one thing, it had an actual wheel, like as a peripheral, so that's cool. It also had 2 pedals, one for acceleration and one that was called the brake pedal, but it acted more like a drift or something.
Okay, kind of like pulling your e-brake up or something in video games.
Yeah, and they also had a 4-way gear shift. So
what?
I know. Basically how the game worked is you've got a top-down view of a racetrack and a little car on it. And it's basically like, if you ever played like the Lego games, like the RC car like mini game, there might be something like that in Mario Party too, but
right.
You're basically a top-down view and you're going around the racetrack as fast as you can. If you hit the edge, you kind of spin out for a second. And I couldn't tell if the original Gran Trak 10 had oil slicks or if that came later, but I want to say it had oil slicks too, where like you wouldn't be able to turn while you were in the oil slick.
Mm-hmm.
So you just kind of slide through it. But I wasn't able to play this game, I should say. As far as you can tell, there's no emulation for it. But there's a lot of videos of people who have this cabinet still, and there's a lot of videos of them playing it, and the game looks really responsive and really fun to play. Also, I want to say, kind of in reference to our special topic at the beginning of this episode, if you own the cabinet, there's like a switch in the back inside the cabinet where you can switch the track out for a different track. So every cabinet had 2 tracks that could be switched out by the electrician. So
right.
I thought that was really cool. So yeah, it's like, I feel like this is, I mean, you could put this in an arcade today and I don't think anyone would really bat an eye, other than it's just black and white graphics. But the racetrack is designed in a way that to use 100% of the screen space, which I can really appreciate. There's also how it keeps score is there's probably like 5 invisible checkpoints throughout the track as you go, and you get like 2 points whenever you cross them. So if you do a full lap, I think it's like 10 points. And you also had a timer that would count down. And again, if you're the electrician, you can control how long the timer is, but I think the normal is either 60 or 100 seconds, something like that. And so you're, racing against the clock to get as many points as you can. And yeah, I just think it's a great game. Like, it looks really responsive. It looks like it'd be really fun to play with the actual like wheel peripheral that you're turning like you would be in a, race track or something like that.
Right.
I think it's a really good game.
Do you know how well it did commercially? I'm curious.
So this is a bit of a complicated one because it sold really well, but Atari apparently made a bad miscalculation when they were estimating how much it would cost to produce it. So they actually accidentally sold it at a huge loss for a while.
Oh.
And actually almost bankrupt the company. But
Yikes.
It sold well, and they would come out with a couple kind of knockoffs or clones that we'll talk about in the next episode that were like redesigned so that they would make profit from it. So it sold well, but they didn't get a lot of money.
Right.
So
that's cool. Yeah, because it seems like it would be really popular. Like I could see people loving that kind of game.
Yeah, and the thing is, at this time, we've mentioned electromechanical games a lot in the past, and there were a lot of electromechanical racing games that used a wheel and pedals as a peripheral. So to have that now on a video game, I think is
Right.
really exciting for a lot of people. So yeah, Gran Trak 10. As far as my ratings go for gameplay, I gave it a 3.5 out of 10. You know, I think the game would play really fun, but you're just against the clock, so I don't think it's as fun as versing another human being.
Right.
And there's just two tracks basically. So, and I feel like with the research I did, probably like 90% of the people had it on the original track. So if you're walking into your arcade, chances are it's just on the one.
Right.
So, you know, after a certain amount of time, I think it will get stale, but I think it's a pretty decent game. For graphics, I gave it a 1.5 out of 10. I feel like the graphics could have been better. I mean, I really like how they used the screen. Like every single part of the screen was used in some way for the track or for the scoring. But the actual car model or sprite or whatever, I didn't think looked that good. It kind of almost looks like a caterpillar or a butterfly or something. Like it's not a great car shape.
Oh, weird. Huh.
Yeah, it looks more like the letter I, but with like circles at the tips of the eye.
Oh, yeah, I get what you mean. I think I've seen similar like race car representations.
Yeah, but just like the scale of it and stuff, it doesn't really look that much like a race car. And the edges were just like little dots that, you know, if you hit them, you would like spin out. But again, I didn't think the dots looked, you know, it didn't give it a good look, I think. So, I mean, it wasn't bad. So I gave it 1.5 out of 10. For sound, the sound's actually like really good. You have like a vroom vroom sound, and the spin out is pretty nice. We'll play a clip of that right now. So you can hear, I mean, it sounds like you're revving that engine, which I thought was pretty nice. And then for relevance, again, I decided to go pretty big. I gave it 8 out of 10 because I feel like this game, we've covered racing games in the past, but this game to me steps it up big time. And it's going to be cloned a lot. And I think this is really the core of what a lot of people consider to be the first racing game. So,
yeah,
you know,
very cool.
Most of the other racing games were more like, what's a good example? Like something like Operation or something, where like you're kind of like trying to get in a narrow, like take a narrow path, but you're not like, it's not like racing. I don't know. I feel like this is different from the other ones somehow. Like it's more authentic. So yeah, I really liked it. And I think it's the first racing game that we've played that has had boundaries, because the only other ones I think are from the Magnavox. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, there might be something else that had like a racing-ish feel, but not like a racing game.
I'm thinking of Space Race, the Frogger one, which is the other.
Right.
But again, that one is like, it's like saying Frogger is a racing game. Like if you're racing against a clock in Frogger, like it's kind of racing, but it's not like a racing game. You know,
it's not like a race car on a track doing a circuit. Yeah, against the time.
This is what, I mean, that is what this is. So I really kind of went high there, and overall I gave it 3.75 out of 10. It's worth a play. I mean, or at least looking up a YouTube video about it. I think everybody will find it interesting. It seems like the cabinets are still pretty widely circulated, so if there's an older arcade near you, you should go and hope that it's there, because it might be, and you should give it a try if it's there.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like it was a really cool one to take a look at.
Yeah, I will say the one thing that I always thought was kind of weird was it's on an upright arcade cabinet, so you're standing while playing.
Oh, with the pedals too?
With the pedals, yeah. But I've seen videos of people playing and they look comfortable, but to me that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I was going to say, shortly after this, we'll find out that there was a outburst of people breaking their ankles in May 1974.
Yeah, I mean, other than having a seat, you're basically in When I go to an arcade today at Dave & Buster's or whatever, we play racing games basically just like this.
Yeah.
I'd say like the gear shift isn't a thing that much anymore, but it's basically the same. I mean, a racing game today is probably in a more of a, what would you call that, isometric view rather than top down.
Kind of like a chase cam, right? Because you're like following the car.
Yeah, but I mean, other than that, it feels just the same. So I think it's got the heart and spirit of racing games today, which, with Maze War that we've also covered today, I think this episode has been a huge leap forward in gaming in just a couple months here in 74.
Yeah, really packed with stuff that's gonna kind of influence genres for ever, I guess.
Forever, yeah. All right, Wes, you want to take us out on your last game?
Yeah, and this is one that, while not incredibly historically relevant, like the other two we just covered, it really surprised me. I was expecting something very boring and mundane. So this one is Clean Sweep by Ramtech, and it was released in May of 1974. It was created by Howell Ivey, who was working for the Air Force, and they had a copy of Computer Space while he was at the Air Force. And once he played that, he decided that he wanted to make video games. And so he made a game that was similar to Pong, but allowed the player to move in 4 different directions, sold it to Ramtech and was hired, although they never ended up making his prototype game. And then right after he was hired, he went on to make Clean Sweep. And it was marketed as being the first 1 to 2 player game with pinball action. So it took me a while. I didn't notice until reading the flyer that basically what this type of game is trying to emulate is pinball. And to give you a picture of what it is, it's sort of like the brick breaking games or like Breakout from Atari that we were going to see later, where you have a paddle that you can just move left to right on the bottom of the screen. And in this version, instead of breaking bricks, there's dots in a grid all over the screen. And when the ball you hit passes over them, they disappear. And you get more points for making more of them disappear. And you go into a different screen if you clean sweep and clear the whole screen off. And the creator of this game also claimed, although the source I was using said it's debatable, that this is the first arcade game to give somebody a free game if they got a high score.
Oh,
and
nice.
As we've seen, that's a staple in like all arcade games now. So just to give a little bit more on the gameplay, depending on how the cabinet was set up, you had either 3 to 5 balls, kind of like pinball. The dots were on a grid, and you had, instead of actually a flat paddle, it was a semicircle paddle that you had on the bottom of the screen to hit the ball back. And you just had to keep hitting the ball to clear all the dots off the screen. It kind of went at random angles when you hit it. I couldn't really figure out how to get that to work. And it also seemed like it had variable speed. And one of the things that was nice about this that I wasn't expecting is that there was also a 2-player version, which instead of 2 people playing at the same time, it just switched to 2 different versions of the same map, and whoever got the most points on that screen would win.
Cool. So every time you missed the ball, it would go to the other person's screen?
Yes, yeah, and I should also say that the left and top were solid, but the bottom where your paddle was is where if the ball went down there, you lost the ball, and it switched off to the other screen.
Okay.
It actually messed with me the first time I played it because I didn't realize I picked 2-player, and I was wondering why everything I cleared off was popping back on the screen every time I lost a ball. But halfway through, I figured it out. So for my ratings for this one, I gave it a 2 out of 10. It's not super special, but the ball moving across the screen is pretty cool. It looks like the dots that you're trying to clear, so that can be a little bit confusing. But despite how plain it was, I really liked that it was pretty simple and clean. And for the most part, other than the ball being a little bit confusing, you could understand what was going on. For sound, I gave it a 1.5 out of 10. It had the usual kind of bleeps and bloops that you'd expect from all the games that we had around this time. But one thing I thought that was really nice is, since there's a sound whenever you hit dots and clear them off the screen, and also there's variable speed, when you're starting on a full screen, if you hit the ball really hard, you just get like tons of beep noises in a row because like all the dots are getting cleared off, and it's really satisfying.
Yeah. Nice.
It's like triggers something deep in your brain when you're like, oh heck yeah, I'm getting a high score for this. The gameplay, I gave a 3 out of 10. It was pretty hard, especially there was a little bit high sensitivity on the version of it I was playing, so I couldn't really control the paddle super well. But it really had that one more game effect on me, and I wasn't expecting that from a game like this.
Nice.
But it felt beatable enough that I was like, oh, come on, I gotta do another and see if I can get further. And never was able to clear a screen, but was able to get a little bit better and kind of figure out how to do the angles and clear more stuff off the screen.
Nice.
So I think at the time it probably would have been definitely easier with a joystick, and I could really see it being super fun, even the 2-player mode when it's not directly competing, but able to kind of fight with each other over the high score. For relevance, I gave it a 3 out of 10. I don't think it's super relevant in the industry, and this isn't really like a staple genre that we see now, but I do think it's sort of an original take on the Pong style sort of game that we haven't really seen, and would probably go on to influence other games that we'd see. I don't know if it's going to directly influence Breakout by Atari, but they do seem to have a similar idea.
Yeah, I do believe it did influence somewhat. So
yeah, I was thinking that, because this is very clearly like the first of that sort of hitting things up to clear stuff at the top, and even like stuff like Space Invaders and similar things where your ship at the bottom or whatever trying to shoot stuff at the top in a way is sort of similar to this.
Yeah.
And for the overall rating, I gave it a 3 out of 10. It's a fun arcade game, something I'd probably still play 1 or 2 times in an arcade today, and fairly engaging, which surprised me for how simple it is. And I like that it had different ways that you could play with 2-player, and it was just hard enough to make sure that you keep trying to get that high score. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had for it. Like I said, I was really surprised. I was looking at it and I'm like, oh man, this looks like a boring Pong clone, but ended up being something pretty unique and had its own flavor.
Nice. Well, wait, what was your overall for that again?
A 3 out of 10. So, I mean, I didn't say it was super duper good, but I definitely enjoyed playing it.
Yeah. I mean, we've played worse games. A lot.
Absolutely. we played a lot worse games.
Nice.
And we've struggled to play games that are a lot worse and just couldn't even play them.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I still feel a little bit bad about Space Sim. Like, I spent like 2 or 3 hours trying to play, and I feel like I barely even got through half of the controls.
I mean, I'm sure you made up for it with that relevance score you gave it, and it definitely has a lot of relevance, but
yeah,
pouring 2 hours into a game like that to be able to get like the minimum experience out of it is definitely a tall ask.
I also, it was funny, I was watching like YouTube videos of it, trying to find examples of people who have played, and this one guy published a video that's like 40 minutes long, and I was like, oh, he's going to be playing some gameplay. Yeah. And it's basically 30 minutes of him reading the instructions and failing to do anything, and then finally he like finds the button that changes the speed of the ship, and he goes off the edge of the world, and an instant game overs, and he just rage quits.
So it sounds pretty similar to your experience.
I know. I'm like, I'm not the only one. By the way, nice. I played that game in the Play-Doh emulator console thing that I played Empire in, which is it's like Cyber 1 P terminal, which is, I don't know if you remember, but it's like that weird terminal where at one point you have to hit like Shift Control S just to log in.
Oh yeah. I do remember you telling me that.
It's like incredibly complicated just navigating, but just to put this in perspective, what the controls were like, to speed the ship up, it was Shift plus, which I guess is plus, and then to slow it down, it's the minus button. So sometimes I would hit like Shift minus by accident, or just plus, and nothing happens. And I don't know, it was just a nightmare.
It sounds like it. I think you're pretty justified in your overall review of that.
Yeah, so let's do a quick recap, Wes. What have we been talking about today?
Well, so we started off with our special topic of arcade machines, how they work, and mini computers at the time. Went through a lot of Pong clones.
Yep. But
also, very importantly, you and I covered the 2 contested first FPS games. And ended it off with the first real, as Ben says, racing game that had the wheel peripherals, and another Pong clone that had a little bit different style to it with Clean Sweep.
Oh, yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, please email us, link us on Twitter or whatever. We'll try to get to them. Check out our website for a timeline of the games and for more information and explanations of our scores written down in a way that's witty and funny and us. And I think that's it. Is that it? I feel like I always forget to say something.
No, I think we're pretty good.
Yeah. Hopefully you liked the music for today. I think I'm going to try to do something special. So hopefully it was good. And I think with no further ado, let's sign off.
All right. We'll see you guys in the next one.
See you in the next one.